Good morning, everybody. I'm Brian Berger, the editor-in-chief of SpaceNews. I want to welcome you to today's webinar. This is the first of 4 SN at SmallSat webinars we'll be doing this week at 11 a.m. As kind of a complement to the excellent programming that SmallSat itself has set up, everybody. Before we get to today's panel discussion with the executives from Rocket Lab, Virgin Orbit, and Firefly Aerospace, we wanted to take a few moments to talk with Marianne Sidwell, the organizer of this year's SmallSat, about what you can expect from this year's conference. Good morning, Marianne.
Good morning.
How are things going? What's the latest in terms of how the conference is getting off to a start?
So far, so good. We actually went live Saturday morning, so we've been going for a couple of days. People have been getting on and perusing the site and looking at different videos and visiting exhibits. But I think today will show a little uptick in energy and excitement and visits. But so far so good. We haven't had any technical issues and everything looks okay.
And how many people do you have registered for this year's conference?
We have just over 7,500 registered as of now.
And how does that compare to last year when you were in person? That sounds right, like roughly double to me.
You're absolutely right, it's double. Last year we had 3,500 live attendees. So yeah, we're double. And the thing we think is kind of cool is that we had people from maybe 45 different countries who came to the conference live, but now here having the conference virtual, we've had people from over 74 different countries logging in.
I can't say I'm surprised by that. When you guys decided to go virtual and also make it free to attend, I assume that you're going to get a lot wider attendance from around the world. Are there any areas that are better represented than others outside of the United States?
It's similar to what we have live. A lot of people from the UK and Europe, and of course New Zealand as well, represented every year. But definitely, I'm sure there's plenty of people in some smaller countries who've never been able to see the content before or visit before, which is really fun to be able to see that.
So I was looking at the site this weekend. I mean, it's great what you guys have done. It's kind of like, it's like as easy as Netflix to use for the most part. I don't know if it's voice commanded. I don't know if it makes recommendations based on sessions you've already watched, but it is very easy to scroll through the on-demand stuff. A question though about accessing the live sessions. You are doing live sessions to complement all the pre-recorded stuff. What do people need to know to do that? If you've already registered for the conference, are you good to go? Can you just click on a live session at the start, or do you need to do something else?
Yeah, so the live sessions are live webinars through Zoom webinar. And so they do require pre-registration to attend those. And once you get into the site, you can look at the live events menu and see those sessions listed. And then if people aren't able to get on and watch them live, we are recording them and we'll post them again the next day for people to watch the ones from the day before. Okay,
very good. Now, if registrants are having any trouble either finding their login, any sort of trouble, where's the help desk this year or the 411?
Yeah, if you just go to smallsat.org, immediately, if you look in the lower right-hand corner, there's a little purple button with the help desk icon on it. Click the help desk, and we've got somebody here just down the hall answering questions live. So if people can't find their email to log on with their password, or if they have questions on navigating the site, we have people here ready to answer the questions.
All right, well, thank you very much. Is there anything else you want us to know about this week? What are you looking forward to? What we should expect?
Well, we're looking forward to all of it, certainly, and having the webinars kick off today with the keynote 1 o'clock Utah time, 3 o'clock Eastern time. We're looking forward to that. And certainly we can't duplicate a live conference. It's unfortunate that we can't gather because that's such an important part of SmallSat. I'm sure all of you who've attended know that. And our goal is, of course, we want to get the community back together as soon as possible. We're really hoping things improve so we can do that next year if at all possible.
Yeah, I should say that that keynote today is with the Director of the National Reconnaissance Office's, Chris Scalise. You can already watch his pre-recorded keynote, and then he's doing a live session today. I see that you're going to take questions. How are you going to handle that?
So we will be taking questions. Some of them, people you can actually submit on the website after you watch a particular video. If you like the video, if you have questions from that, there's a little form on the website you can submit the question, and then it will go to the moderator for that webinar session. And the moderator will direct questions to the speakers. But we also have the Q&A feature live. So if people have questions while they're watching it, they're live, they can submit them then as well.
Excellent. Well, I know Space News will be covering that, and I encourage everybody who's interested to tune in as well. Well, thank you, Marianne. I know you got a busy day. Thanks very much for joining us, and we'll be talking to you later this week.
Thanks a lot, Brian.
No problem. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Foust, who is our senior staff writer. He covers, as you know, he covers a lot of civil space, space policy, and he covers the commercial launch industry. So Jeff, why don't you introduce today's panel and we'll get right into it.
All right. Thanks, Brian. And good morning to everybody, or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where in the world you are. We have a panel that is spanning, by my calculations, 19 time zones between the West Coast of the US and New Zealand. But, you know, as those who have attended the Small Satellite Conference in the past know, launch, access to space for small satellites is a perennial issue. The first SmallSat conference I went to back in 2003, there was a up-and-coming company that was offering low-cost access to space for small satellites on a small launch vehicle. You might have heard of them, SpaceX. They've moved on to bigger things, but there are a lot of other companies out there today that are developing small launch vehicles, trying to offer responsive access to space, low-cost access to space, frequent access to space. And we've got executives of 3 of those companies that are either in service today with those vehicles or in the process of development and testing and soon entering service with those vehicles. So we have Peter Beck, who is the CEO of Rocket Lab. He is joining us from Launch Complex 1 in New Zealand, where it is a little after 3 o'clock in the morning. Thank you, Peter. We have Dan Hart, President and CEO of Virgin Orbit, and we have Brad Schneider, who is the Chief Revenue Officer of Firefly Aerospace. So thanks to all 3 of you for joining us. Peter, I thought we'd start with you because first of all, you're joining us here in the middle of the night from New Zealand. We appreciate that. You made an announcement back on Friday about the investigation into your most recent Electron launch about a month ago that ended in failure. I thought you might be able to give a quick recap of what that investigation found and what your return to flight plans are.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jeff. So, you know, during that investigation, we were able to narrow it right down to root cause pretty quickly, as everybody can see. You know, behind me here, there'll be a vehicle come on that pad in about 10 days time. And during that anomaly, what we saw is, you know, the good thing about the anomaly was that we had great clean data all the way, you know, through to it, and in fact past it. And you know, what we saw is a electrical connection fail, which ultimately resulted in the termination of thrust of the vehicle. So it was a very tricky failure. It managed to evade a barrage of pre-flight acceptance testing, and if you had to describe it, you'd pretty much call it a thermal failure, because there was a joint that had excess resistance. The resistance created heat. The heat created thermal expansion. The thermal expansion moved the component and allowed some potting compounds to flow into it, which had also been heated and, you know, create the disconnect. So you know, it only ever manifested itself after you know, a long time at high load. So the good news with that is, though, that it's a very, very detectable, and we've built over 720 of this particular component, and this was the only one we'd seen that had this kind of behavior. So right now we're in the middle of screening all of the stock and the vehicle. Everything looks good. So as I mentioned, we'll be rolling out here and flying in the next sort of 10 or 12 days.
Great. And who's going to be flying on that return to flight mission?
Yeah, we haven't announced a customer yet. That'll be very, very shortly, though.
All right. And so just to make sure I completely understand, and our viewers completely understand, you had basically this failure of this electrical connection, and that deprived the upper stage of power. And, you know, one of the aspects of the Electron is the electric turbo pumps. And so is it fair to assume that's basically what caused the stage to shut down?
Yeah, we had a high voltage and low voltage disconnect. So, you know, it was on a main bus rail. So, yeah, when it disconnected, everyone would have seen that the live stream camera shut down. That was on the low, the bottom end bus rail. So when that camera shut down is when we lost that power.
Right. Thanks, Dan. It's been about
good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Dan. It's been about 2 months since you did your launch demo. You got a number of milestones ticked off from that, although you didn't quite achieve orbit on that mission. Where do things stand in terms of the investigation to that launch and your plans for your next mission?
Sure. So, we had both an exuberant day in that we were able to, go through our whole launch sequence on our first try and really tick off all the milestones associated with air launch and get our main stage engine lit and move along our trajectory. A few seconds later, we had a breach in our high pressure feed line. As Peter just said, data is absolutely gold when you're flying a rocket. So we had 4 ground stations receiving solid lock on telemetry, and we were very happy with the data that we got. We've been through an investigation. We were ready for an investigation from the get-go in that we knew as our first flight, there was a 50-50 shot that's where we'd be. And we've made very good progress, essentially identifying components in our main feed line that needed to be strengthening and some margin that needed to be increasing in our pneumatic system associated with that. So the modifications have been established. The parts are in fab. The rocket is in integration. Right now, we just finished propulsion functional test on Saturday, and we're planning to move that rocket along to a next flight before the end of the year, hopefully with NASA VCLS. We're delighted to say as our next customer.
Okay. And that's the contract that you got from NASA a few years back for the demonstration for this Venture Class Launch Services mission.
That's exactly right. And we've been very closely coordinating with NASA and feeding them the information associated with our qual programs as well as our first flight. And we're now a few feet away getting the fairing ready and the payload adapter ready to receive those spacecraft.
All right, great. Brad, want to check in with Firefly. You guys are approaching a first launch of your Alpha launch vehicle in the near future. How is the preparations for that inaugural launch coming along?
It's going extremely well. First of all, I'd like to compliment the regulatory oversight for both, Peter returning back to flight and Dan's activity. That's a true shot in the arm for the industry as we move forward in that proactive manner. But Firefly is moving aggressively towards our first flight, roughly the end of October of this year. We have been delayed because we're trying to do it right. So we'd like to have a nice press release in that time frame of putting 6 payloads exactly where they need to be. So that first test flight is an orbital flight with customers on board. We're working through a number of test elements with regard to second stage and first stage. We do have a really robust test complex in Briggs, Texas that can accommodate most of the activities that we're trying to get through right now. So I'm excited to say that we're on the right path, we're at the right place at the right time, and excited to lead ourselves into this path, both with Virgin and Rocket Lab. So I look forward to questions and further status updates as we move along.
So you are both developing the launch vehicle and you're getting the launch site ready at Vandenberg. How's both coming in terms of the launch vehicle testing and the launch site preparation?
Yeah, well, launch site preparations aren't for the faint of heart either, right? So at Vandenberg, we do have the Slick 2 pad, the old Delta 2 pad that is really coming together nicely. Check out our social media and all the assets that are moving there now. We've got really big physical infrastructure that's moving in, both from the launch stand as well as the TAL will be showing up soon. We have a really nice mission control or firing control room that's been established. You can see that as well. But from a launch vehicle standpoint, again, we want to get it right. And we're methodically, slowly going through, and we realize launch dates have slipped and so forth. But Our Briggs facility is active. COVID has not really put us underwater. We've been hiring through this unfortunate period of time as well. And our staffing really is motivated to bring this thing to the pad.
Right. You bring up a good point that I wanted to touch on, is that, all these activities have been going on amid a, global pandemic that's, had a lot of effects on the economy. I'm curious what you've been seeing in terms of interest from potential customers for your launch services. Have you seen a drop off in demand? Have you seen an increase in demand? How has that affected, your attracting customers?
Yeah, I don't think COVID has impacted our demand at all. I think the market is somewhat a bit fickle right now, and people are waiting to see who's to be coming to the market. With recent failures and whatnot, customers do get a bit concerned, as you very well know. But we're very much active with both the commercial and our U.S. government customers, and I don't see anybody in particular that's backing away from this period of time. Other than, again, I think it's a really good shot in the arm for regulatory to really get everybody back to the pad and their cadence as quick as possible. But bottom line is, I see the market still developing. Firefly's throw rate is about a metric ton to a LEO orbit. So we're a bit larger. It's a bit different. The vehicle's a bit larger. We're trying to rack and stack as much as we can, but I do see the market continue to move and grow in the manner that we're all hoping for.
Yeah. One of the common topics of discussion at past SmallSat conferences has been the number of small launch vehicles in development. We've seen presentations in the past that have counted 100 or more such vehicles in development. We've seen activities, including as recently as last night, Astrup and Kodiak trying to do a launch of their vehicle and had to scrub because of winds and boats in the range. But they're working. We're seeing some activity with companies like ABL raising money for their small launch vehicle. The question always is, there's got to be a shakeout coming, that there's not enough demand for all of these vehicles. And so, Peter, I know you've spoken out on this before. When is that shakeout coming? We've been expecting it for a while. It hasn't quite materialized yet. Will it be coming soon, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still a lot of companies there with a lot of funding, but if you look at the marketplace right now with Rocket Lab and with the SpaceX rideshare, there really is a lot of options, and the market's going to have to grow an awful lot to support more launch providers. So I'm a little bit worried if everybody brings their launch vehicle on the line, there's going to be a lot of vehicles sitting on the pad waiting for payloads, because I think we're in a unique position as we've flown a lot, and we have a lot of relationships with a lot of customers. So I think we have a pretty good idea of what's out there, and the programs that are coming down the chute. So the market is growing, which is great. But I think it's fair to say that it's not at the place we were all hoping it would be, at this point in time. So it's got a lot of growth to go, to be able to support, a whole bunch of launch vehicles for sure.
Yeah, Dan, you want to weigh in on that in terms of what you think the market is, and how many vehicles you can, besides you, of course, can be supported?
First, going back to your first comment, as Brad mentioned, this is a developing market area, and it's messy, and I think COVID is amplifying the dynamics. And so we're seeing winners, and we're seeing, people fall out, and we're seeing reinventions in some cases of concepts. And that's going to go on, and we're seeing, some movement to the right. We're also seeing both civil space and national security government activity that's a little stronger. And so, the use of small satellites is definitely growing. The concepts are growing. The market is growing. That said, certainly, we're not going to have 100 healthy small launch providers launching on a frequent basis. So there will be a shakeout. What we're seeing, I think, is the number of people moving real hardware along into launch operations and launch is not very large. And we will continue to have innovation and ideas popping and labels and people wanting to raise money. And so you may have, many launch companies for a long time, but you'll only have a few that are actually launching, and then there'll be, some real competition, and a handful will survive. And it'll be the ones that really can differentiate.
All right, great. One of the issues that has come up is the role that the U.S. government is playing in supporting and shaping this market. In our new issue of Space News magazine, my colleague Sandra Irwin and I looked at, some of the activities that have been going on, particularly by the Defense Department, including I think the now infamous Defense Production Act awards that were announced and then retracted over the course of a matter of weeks. Brad, I'd like to weigh in with you from your perspective. What's the role that the government should play as a customer or supporter? And is there a risk that the government might distort the dynamics of the marketplace by how it chooses contracts and picks winners and losers?
Well, I think the government's been very vocal in terms of they want to follow on the commercial element of these small launchers in the development. So I do believe that as we move forward into Space Development Agency, Space Force, and the growth within just smaller assets, higher utility and sensors and spacecraft, and really that the momentum coming from that side of which the reason why we launch is I don't think it'll be distorted. I think we will be very much a leverage position for the government and our commercial customers really to build a robust, resilient network of which we've been talking about for quite some time. And the launchers on this panel represent from a smaller to medium to a larger. And I think those platforms really, from a demo standpoint to moving into operational cadences with flying multiples at a time, I think the government very much is in a strong position. I do believe that from having 100 of us on the list and trying to pick and choose who's critical to industrial base and so forth is an interesting element. But again, I think it's going to be proven out as we individually become more and more robust and reliable in our production and really our throughput. So the answer to the question is no, I don't think the government's going to distort the market at all.
Peter, you've signed up a number of U.S. government customers, NASA, Air Force, NRO. How important is the U.S. government as a customer to you and to the broader industry?
Yeah, so incredibly important, and that's reciprocal as well. The government has become reliant on Rocket Lab to deliver payloads of national significance, and so I think the reliance is both ways. But look, I'm one for competition. So I would much rather that a government decide what are the things that are important to the nation, and build those spacecraft, develop those programs, and let the launch companies go to the mat on it and compete for those. I think there is a risk of distorting the market. So a slightly different viewpoint from Brad, I guess. If governments pull some levers and create some unnatural market forces, then I think when that goes away, it doesn't leave the industry in a stronger place. But for sure, the government is absolutely critical, ensuring a backbone of the industry and its capability that the government needs. So I think it's very reciprocal, but I certainly don't want any petty contracts. Let's bid them out fairly, and the best launch provider will win.
All right. Dan, what's your views on the role of U.S. government as a customer, potential market shaper?
Well, I think the government has a huge opportunity right now in that there's an enormous amount of private investment, and there's a multiplying effect they can create with some investment and focus contracts towards this new part of the market. I think the way they need to approach it is, what are the systems that provide the U.S. government the most utility, whether it's in civil space or national security. And certainly there are differences in the systems, in capabilities. You know, we have our mobility, we have our reusability and our first stage and our responsiveness that we feel is very strong. But each system has its own strengths and weaknesses. The government has historically had difficulty in spanning between what is completely government owned and developed and what is completely commercial, and therefore, you know, completely hands off. And I think, you know, there are some success stories out there of where the government has really made investment for things that are really important for them, and systems that have brought forth both on the spacecraft side as well as the launch vehicle side. And I think the government has some real opportunity here. They just need to think it through and be very focused on the needs and the uses in this time of resilient space, responsive space, how our allies and we work together in that environment. And I think there's some clear choices that they need to make and move forward on.
Great. I want to remind viewers that if you want to ask a question, you can use the Q&A button down on the lower right part of the screen. We may try and get one or two in as time permits. I want to turn from the US government as a customer to commercial as a customer. Brad, you've mentioned that you've got some payloads that you're flying on the first alpha flight this fall. Are these commercial customers, and in general, what sort of interest are you seeing from the commercial side, given that there's a lot of demand for small satellites, but there's a lot of competition for flying those vehicles?
Yeah, on the commercial front, it's a bit different. There is a lot of price pressure, as we very well know. We've seen with the dynamics of pricing within the industry. Most of our commercial customers, they are in a wait and see mode, and they want to see performance. And before we enter into really long-term deals with everybody. But we do have some really interesting payloads on the first mission that really could lead into some depth on some long-term deals. We do have LSAs signed with commercial customers for long-term deals that extend into 2023. So I see the commercial market really robust as well. So the way I see it is about a 50-50 mix right now. But from a commercial standpoint, the mega constellations, these big deals that are out there, we believe, you know, we're not going to participate much in those other than maybe from a replacement or reconstitution point of view. But as we rack and stack, we have very much good, robust relationships with our commercial customers as well. So again, as I stated, it's about a 50-50 mix. So it's very important to us going forward.
All right. You know, Peter, you've signed up a number of commercial customers and launched them over the last couple of years. What are you seeing in terms of the market dynamics on the commercial side?
Yeah, so I think it's quite interesting. You know, people who fly on an Electron are generally, you know, folks who really care about the dedicated nature of the service. So, you know, if you're a rideshare customer, then generally you would have been looking to a PSLV or a Vega or now a SpaceX. But, you know, we service a class where, you know, for the price, you can own, you know, the complete vehicle, your orbit, your destiny, your time frame. So what we're seeing from a commercial customer standpoint is basically two things. Somebody who, you know, has that baked into their business model where they need to get up to a particular orbit in a particular time frame, and we fit them perfectly. And you can see we've flown a number of those larger platforms, 100, 150 kilogram platforms to date. And then the next bucket falls into a category of people with their hair on fire, where they've booked a ride on a rideshare vehicle, and then it slips and slips and slips, and they realize that the cost delta between a rideshare and a dedicated Electron and the loss of revenue it trades really well. So we get in fact, we hold at least 2 slots open a year for customers that absolutely just need to get up in a very, very short period of time. But yeah, I think our manifesto is made up of sort of 50% commercial and 50% government also. But you know, there's certainly a lot of growth, and through COVID as well. You know, we were shut down for a while. PSLV, Vega, with their incidents shut down for a long time. So we see an important service that we've been providing is just helping those customers get on orbit that have been really affected, by COVID or one or the other. So we're seeing really, really strong signings right now on commercial payloads.
Dan, one of the attributes you've emphasized about Launcher One is the air launch capability and the ability to fly from any number of locations. How has that resonated with potential customers? Are customers coming up to you saying, we'd love to launch if you can launch from a certain particular location, whether it's in the United States or in England or elsewhere?
We've had really great discussions about and interactions about our mobility. And that's key as commercial and governments strategize together of how to establish ecosystems, economies, and participate globally in the space economy, as well as in the national security world, where since the beginning of launch, we've been having to launch off of a monument that everybody understands, expects, and watches very closely every single launch. So both of those factors are really spawning agreements and understandings between ourselves and commercial companies, and very often it's commercial companies working with their government. We, for instance, have a initiative or a contract active to launch from Cornwall in the UK. And watching the UKSA working very closely with the UK commercial community, and now having the RAF through Project Artemis in discussions about utilizing the capability. I think we're going to see much more of that because we're seeing a world where countries want to have their own access to space, want their own space programs. Many countries now have small satellite manufacturing capabilities, and it's more than just how many bits are needed to communicate or map the world. It's how many organizations want to own their resource so that they can understand the world and have some ownership of the data that they're using.
Brad mentioned this earlier, so I'll give him a chance to weigh in first. But it was at SmallSat a year ago that SpaceX announced a pretty aggressive SmallSat rideshare program with some very low prices, and there was a lot of concern, I think, in the broader SmallSat community that this program would create a lot of pricing pressure, particularly on the launch vehicle startups. So, Brad, you mentioned this earlier. Are you seeing effects of the SpaceX program or other rideshare opportunities as a competition for your business and a driver on prices?
Oh, absolutely. But I think, again, as Peter indicated, you got the hair on fire guys and you got the ones that can wait and so forth. But some customers, if they're not on orbit, they're losing a lot of revenue, right? So I believe it offers a nice option for those that want to wait and get a lower cost ride. It's not necessarily that we're trying to be chased to the bottom of the pricing market and build out and compete with that price. We're very much aware of it, and it gets brought up periodically. But again, with these small dedicated launchers, you can control your launch windows, right? You can control your L10, you can control where you want to go. So for some customers, that's a perfect alternative. For others, it's the price is not so much the major indicator. If you're losing a lot of revenue per month, you want to get on orbit. So again, it comes up in discussions, to be honest with you, all the time. But again, we're dealing with it as we move forward.
For Peter, similar question. Are you seeing pricing pressure created by SpaceX or other rideshare aggregators, or other competitive pressures on your business?
Yeah, I mean, look, Jeff, we fill a really unique niche, and we spent a lot of time before we started building Electron trying to figure out where the value proposition would be. And at that time, there was always PSLV, which is a very, very low cost solution. So we never really tried to compete with these kind of rideshare packages, and that's fundamentally what size the Electron launch vehicle. If you go larger than the Electron launch vehicle, you have to put a bunch of stuff in there to make the business case close, and it becomes too expensive for a customer to own. So for us, this is very strategic in the niche, in the class that we had decided to pursue. And that as there's been really aggressive ride shares come on the market like SpaceX, that's played out. So it hasn't really affected our business model at all, because it's just a totally different customer.
Yeah. Dan, is that what you're seeing as well?
I think we're going to see a small satellite industry that evolves to make use of the rockets that come to fruition. And it's always a bit of a chicken and egg. You're asking that question at a time when I'm reminded that the 747 and the 380 are now out of production officially. And that was the hub and spoke theory for air travel, that travelers wanted to get to massive amounts of travelers wanted to get from one destination to the other, and then they would go to the places that they really wanted to get to, their final destination. And the reason why those aircraft are being retired is because the customers have gotten more demanding as air travel has matured, as they have matured and realized that their time equals money, and they really need to get to where they want to get to soonest, and they're willing to pay for the point-to-point travel. And I think you're going to see the same evolution happen in small satellites. There are many customers right now who need to get to their final destination and don't want to be part of a large rocket carrying large payloads when those large payloads travel. And that's only going to grow as the small satellite companies mature and don't have time to wait for a big rocket to be ready or to go to an orbit that really isn't optimum for their business need.
All right, we're getting near the end of our allotted time. Peter, I did want to ask you, because this has come up, a few people have submitted variations of this question, and this is again going back to the investigation into the launch failure last month. Why this particular problem showed up only on the 13th flight of this vehicle? Why didn't this show up earlier, given the vehicle's quite successful track record up until that point? Why didn't that problem show up earlier?
Well, the night before, I walked under a ladder and a black cat crossed my path, so I think that's the only logical explanation for that. But look, like I say, this was an incredibly unique failure, and very difficult to screen for in the pre-flight acceptance testing. But obviously, we've uncovered that now, and it's rectified. But yeah, it's just look, it's one of those things we've built over 700. I think the number is 728 of these components. So statistics catches up with you at some point.
All right, great. One final question that I want to ask each of you in turn. Hopefully, a year from now, we'll be able to meet again in person at Utah State for next year's SmallSat conference. From now until then, what do you see as sort of the biggest opportunity for each of your companies, but also, the biggest threat that you're facing, whether it's, internal or external, whatever the case may be. So Peter, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure. I mean, there's a couple of things that I'm super excited about. The reason why I'm here at our LC1 right now is today we just we did one of the last two drop tests for our recovery flight. So we did a full-scale drop test out of the sky, and then tomorrow morning we're doing another one. So hopefully this time next year we'll be reusing electrons. But also thing I'm most excited about is our satellite division that's growing enormously, and being able to provide that true end-to-end solution. Launch for Rocket Lab was just kind of phase one. Phase two is moving into spacecraft and providing a complete turnkey solution for all of our customers. And I guess the thing that worries me, if you put COVID aside, is just continuing to be able to scale at the pace that we have been, and being able to hire great people. I think there's a huge shortage of talent within the space industry. And we've kicked off apprenticeships, and we sponsor PhDs. We're doing everything we can to create that talent, but that'll be the throttle for Rocket Lab. It has been to date and will continue to be the throttle for Rocket Lab. So we just need so many people right now in our space division and our manufacturing. So I would be remiss without taking this opportunity to say, please send us your CV. We need you.
All right. Dan, biggest opportunity, biggest concern?
Well, I mean, we are just about to start our commercial operations. So we'll do our launch demo 2 coming up before the end of the year, hopefully, and then we'll get into a regular cadence. We look forward to and plan to demonstrate our mobility next year, and that's another big milestone to really get into a rhythm with the whole system. And of course, the market will reflect that as far as our interaction, whether it's the government or the commercial market, in that there's a lot of activities and discussions going on that will only accelerate as we get into that cadence. So that's the opportunities that I'm really looking forward to. If I think about what are we concerned about, well, obviously you're always concerned about a lot of things as you move into the early stages of testing and launch, but doing it in this COVID environment is interesting. I mean, we've had to redesign how we work. But we are working in uncharted territory here. We're used to developing rockets where everybody is together. And now we're really relying on the virtual connectivity and communication. And so that worries me a bit. And I obviously worry about when will this be over, and how much will it affect the economy as we go forward, as everybody is.
All right, great. Brad.
As we enter this next year, it's going to be exciting in the next short period of time in front of us. We're moving first and second stage to Vandenberg here shortly. So you'll see the launch vehicle being stacked on a completely retrofitted launch stand, static fired, and proceeding this first launch, and then working into the first part of 21, a very active campaign. And this time next year, we should be looking back on multiple launches under our belt. And really setting the pace and the tone for a very nice hook that we see in 2022. So I look forward to this time next year, and hopefully it's face-to-face, because after 20 years of attending this conference, this is a bit weird to be doing it this way. But nonetheless, we have a very exciting 12 months in front of us. And also, I would challenge everybody to take a look at our social media. We've been forming a really interesting relationship with Autodesk, and you can get a good behind the scenes look at Firefly and what we've been doing in controlling the design to this point, and then going through the next repetitive stages going forward to really optimize the vehicle to really meet that cadence. So take a look at our social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or our website. And again, let's cross our fingers this next year that COVID has been put to bed, that we've got everything in place, and we're back to the world as we know it, and we're back, our economy's booming. So that's all we can hope for.
That's a great thing to hope for. Brad, Dan, Peter, thank you very much for joining us, whether you tuned in early Monday morning or the early morning hours Tuesday in New Zealand. We appreciate you joining us and sharing your insights.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. Cheers. Thanks.
All right, thanks everybody. Thanks, Jeff, for moderating that panel discussion with us. For everybody who's in the audience, now we're going to transition to a reporters roundtable. So I'm going to bring on the rest of the SpaceNews staff to chat a little bit about what they expect this week, what they're looking for from a news perspective, what they're looking for to come out of SmallSat this week. Jeff, since you're on camera right now, well, let me introduce everybody first. I see on my screen, Sandra Irwin is joining us from Arlington, Virginia. Hello, Sandra.
Hello, Brian. Good to see you.
Sandra's our national security reporter. We also have Caleb Henry, who's joining us, I believe, from, well, looks like maybe he's back in Silver Spring. Okay, yeah. He's back. He'd been out in New Jersey doing it safely, I suppose, but Caleb's back. He is our telecommunications reporter. And we have Deborah Werner joining us from San Francisco. Say hello, Deborah.
Hello.
That's the way you get on camera. All right. And Caleb, I don't think you said anything to get on camera.
Well, hi, everybody. Yes.
All right. So Jeff, let's go to you. You've gone to more small sats, I believe, than anybody on the Space News staff. So kind of what are you expecting from this week? Why don't we just start there?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be the most novel small sat ever because of the virtual setting, but a lot of the issues remain the same. And, you know, again, what we discussed in the launch panel covers a lot of the longstanding concerns in the small sat community about access to space. People are always looking for more rides to space. They're looking for less expensive rides to space. They are looking, you know, increasingly on responsive rides to space, particularly for those companies that are developing small sats for constellations or for other business purposes that want to get them up quickly and don't want to wait on an uncertain rideshare launch schedule. So, you know, access to space has long been an issue at SmallSat. That's going to be, you know, again, another topic this year now that we see small launch vehicles enter service or begin more dedicated testing, and again, also see some of the more robust rideshare opportunities and some of the other options like the in-space transportation systems to allow some of these small sats that fly on rideshares to one orbit to get to their preferred orbit. So that's, again, that's a big issue, an ongoing issue, but you know, just as important as ever.
I see some of these on-orbit rideshare systems as kind of like they're a last mile solution, essentially, right? You get up into space and then they take you to your final destination. Do you see these more as a benefit to rideshare offerings from the like of SpaceX and Arianespace, or do they have a role to play in launch services offered by our panelist?
You know, I think the first place they're going to play is in the larger rideshare, the SpaceX, Arianespace. You know, we've seen Russia do rideshare on Soyuz launches. You know, in that case, you know, you're flying to a particular orbit, but you may not have a lot of control over what orbit you want to go to. So if you want to go to a higher orbit or a different inclination, you need some sort of in-space transportation service that some of these companies are providing to be able to, again, get that last mile service to that right orbit. You could see eventually over time these transition to some of these smaller launch vehicles, given that some of these small launch vehicles do rideshare as well. You see multiple customers on even a Rocket Lab Electron launch, which is a fairly small launch vehicle, but often carries satellites from multiple customers who often may want to go to different orbits. And so an in-space transportation service could eventually be useful for them as well.
Sandra, let me go to you. You ordinarily this week would be down in Huntsville, Alabama for SMD. So I believe this is your first small sat. What, from a national security perspective, from the perspective of your beat, what do you see as some of the news potential this week?
Mm-hmm. So the biggest name on the lineup for small satellites is the director of the NRO, Chris Scalise, and he's going to be talking about. He will have a live session this afternoon, but he's already posted a speech, and they're very interested in the small sat technology. They're very interested in small launch technology. They're really interested in leveraging all the new technology that they can use for experiments, also for operational systems. So I think the NRO is probably going to be one of the biggest proponents for small satellites in the government, and I think they're going to be looked upon as a major customer for a lot of companies. Although a lot of what they do is classified, so we don't get to hear much about, other than they have a few CubeSats going on some mission coming up, but a lot of what they do is classified. So that's one of them. We also have the director of the Space Development Agency on the lineup, and the Space Development Agency also is getting a lot of attention because they are investing in LEO constellations, small satellites. They actually have several solicitations out on the street right now for their communications constellation, for their missile tracking constellation for different demonstrations, engineering projects. So there's a lot of activity. So the director, Derek Tournier, is going to give a talk, and I'm sure that people are going to be paying attention. Besides that, I think, obviously, we are hosting 2 events tomorrow and Wednesday that I think have a significant news-making value for the national security community. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about Blackjack, the DARPA program that is actually leading the way in how DoD is going to go with LEO satellites and LEO constellations. So I think that's going to be a very important talk. And we're going to hear from the Deputy Program Manager, Stephen Forbes, and from a panel of industry executives in the program. And then on Wednesday, we're going to hear from 2 officials from the Space and Missile Systems Center, Colonel Russ Tehan and Colonel Joe Ross, who are involved in the architecture and prototyping of space systems. So I think SMC, obviously being the biggest national security space agency, is going to have a major role. So I think that's going to be really interesting to hear what they have to say.
So for those 2 events, there's still time to sign up for them. Just go to spacenews.com. You'll see
yes.
a post towards the top of our website with information for all 4 webinars we're doing this week. Registration's free, but we do ask you to sign up ahead of time. Deborah, I'm just going to go from left to right on my screen. So I wanted to come to you next. I know you cover. You've been writing quite a lot about NOAA, for example. I know they're on the agenda this week. You've been writing a lot about some of the space startups in this sector. What's exciting to you?
There's so many things to learn about every year at SmallSat. I'm sorry that we're not there together where we can have side chats with people about all of the issues, because there's so many things. One is mitigation of debris. In the early years at SmallSat, people wanted to emphasize the point there weren't very many of them. They were very small and they were in low orbits. As we begin to talk about many thousands of them, ESPA class down to single unit CubeSats, people are looking at ways to mitigate debris in terms of putting propulsion on their CubeSats, putting transponders on their CubeSats. That is one of the discussions that I find really interesting. Another one, Caleb and I have a panel coming up Thursday where we'll be talking to manufacturers of many of these small sats. We've got L3 Harris, AAC Clyde, Planet, Leo Stella, Nano Avionics, and Tyvak coming. And that's a good cross-section of this market. People with different size CubeSats and different audiences. So it'll be interesting to hear how their programs are shaping up since we met last year.
Caleb, this is not your first small sat either. What are your expectations for handling it virtually?
It's not my first, but I think this might only be my second, honestly. I went to one several years ago, and I enjoyed following the little small sat sticker rockets around to get to where I needed to go. I don't know if there's an online equivalent of those, but I am looking forward to, I guess when you go to a conference, you can only go to so many things during a day. So one of the upsides that there's so many things that are recorded, you can catch up on things that you might not usually get a chance to. I'm also looking forward to perhaps one takeaway from this year's event will be learning how some companies have learned from their experience with ride shares for small sats. I think Jeff was touching on this earlier. I think there's a couple of talks about Vega with the SSMS, and that's their first aggregated small sat mission. So 53 at last check small sats that are supposed to launch on that. And then I think there's a recap of the STP-2 mission with Falcon Heavy. That one was a long time coming. So I'm really curious to see what some of the lessons learned there were, as well as some of the technology evolutions that will affect future generations of spacecraft, whether it's more evolved ground systems or propulsion systems and things of that nature.
Thanks, Caleb. So the Space News crew has been, I guess you could say, binge watching some of the pre-recorded sessions. for this year's SmallSat. So I'll just open this up to the team. Any must-sees that you guys have come across that you would bring to people's attention? Anyone find anything that you thought seemed especially worthwhile this year? I know we've so Sandra mentioned that Scalise's talk is already up. You can see an early version of that. I saw that NOAA is going to be discussing their future architecture to some extent. That's still very much a work in progress. SpaceNews is going to visit that topic at the end of the month with our own webinar with Steve Volz, the head of NESDIS, and Vanessa Griffin.
Yes.
Vanessa Griffin is running the architecture program now that Karen St. Germain has gone over to NASA. And so Deborah will be talking with them at the end of the month. Anything else though on the schedule that you might, that's either worth a watch or that you haven't checked out yet, but that you plan to?
I have one that it may be a little arcane for a lot of people, but this is the David Voss from the US Space Force. He's a Space Force technologist. And he has a talk about the future space architecture for the military. It's really interesting because he talks about how they want to bring in commercial, military, allied government satellites into an architecture so people can actually, the users, the military, can get data from space like they get an Uber or a Lyft ride. They go to an app and they say, well, I need data like right now. So I don't have time to wait for the government satellite. So I need a commercial satellite. Maybe somebody else wants a high-res image, but they can afford to wait a little longer. So then they go to the government satellite. So having that option, like customers have options for ride shares, to have that option sounds really cool. And that's interesting how the Space Force is going to pull that off with, David Voss being a well-known in the community as a futurist, a technologist, and so his talk may be worthwhile for people in the DoD business to hear that. Thanks,
Sandra. One of the things we get out of SmallSat each year is it's not just the sessions, but just running into people in the exhibit center around the campus, even around Logan. It's a good way to just kind of reconnect with people and find news. And people make announcements, right? We have a bunch of press conferences that kind of take place either pre-planned or kind of impromptu in the exhibit center. Anybody doing that this year? Anybody's got anything lined up or that they're expecting this week?
Yeah, there have been a couple this morning already, and more coming this week. This morning, Momentous announced that with their Vigoride last mile service, they would have hosted payloads on it. So they would drop off all their customers who signed up for the last mile ride, and then at the end use whatever power and time is remaining to devote it to one or more hosted payloads. So that's one that has already come out. And I know there are more announcements coming on things like weather satellites throughout the week.
Well, these are the people you want to send the announcements to. All of us are kind of waiting for any sort of news you folks have, or especially interested in any new business deals you conclude, be it a contract or an investment round, anything of that nature. We're coming up at the top of the hour. The SpaceNews team is going to be busy this afternoon watching those live sessions. In the interest of keeping our website up to date with comprehensive coverage of this year's conference. We'll be sending out a newsletter each day. Our first newsletter went out at 10 a.m. this morning. You can go to spacenews.com/newsletters to figure out how to sign up for our newsletters. I think if you're registered for the conference, it's also going to go out to you automatically. I should note that our August 3rd issue is available as a free download on the website that has a lot of coverage that's geared to the small satellite audience. And of course, you can find out more about our webinars, and to make sure you sign up for them. Then Zoom will take care of the rest to make sure that you don't forget by sending you notifications. Is there anything I forgot, guys?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, that's it for today, everybody. We hope to see you back here tomorrow. Wishing you all a very great and productive SmallSat. Take care.